At the end of your life, what will be your legacy? What will you leave behind for future generations? For the world, join the World Messenger, Izabela Lundberg, each week as she brings you a new distinguished guest from the business, sports, or entertainment world to share their success, their struggles, and their lessons. They will share their insights into current hot topics that affect everyone. Izabela facilitates an intimate, vulnerable environment to find the true value of humanity and real leadership. Are you ready for your legacy? The legacy that matters?
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela Lundberg here, the World Messenger, and inviting you for another epic show of the legacy leaders. Today, I have a special guest that is joining me and that I absolutely cannot wait for you to get to know and learn more. That is joining me from Daytona Beach in Florida. His background is exceptional. He's retired lieutenant. He's been with U.S. Army. He obviously retired, but has tremendous experience. And right now it's also very much so involved in an education. In addition, he's the author and very accomplished speaker. But interesting thing about this particular guest is he's also author of the book, Your Leadership Legacy. So without further ado, let's welcome Oakland McCulloch, who is joining us right now from beautiful Daytona Beach. How are you?
I'm doing well, Izabela, and thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm just super eager to see, because we have quite a bit of different paths, but actually our listeners might be surprised how much we have in common beside passion for legacy and specifically legacy leadership. So if you don't mind, could you just share, first of all, how did you get into a leadership and specifically focusing on legacy?
Yeah, so what people ask me a couple of questions. One, why did how did the book come around? Why did I write the book? And I always tell people that, my last duty assignment on active duty, I was the professor of military science of an Army ROTC program at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama. And I used to go around and talk to high school students and college students and some businesses and those things, but mainly high school and college students. And I would ask them what they want to be, and they'd all say, well, I want to lead things, I want to be a leader. And I say, okay, so what does that look like? What does that take? And I got that deer in the headlights look, that they knew they wanted to be a leader, but they had no idea what it took to be a leader. And so I came up with a presentation that can be anywhere from about 45 minutes to a 2-hour presentation, depending on what somebody wants, but talking about what it takes to be a leader. And so that's how the book kind of came along. And then, and I, because I want to get out and speak more, because I really am passionate about helping young men and women become the best leader they can be. And I realized that if I want to reach more people, that I got to write a book so that more people can do it, can see it. And then if they want, I can come talk to them and do the speaking engagement and help that way as well. But certainly the book came about because I want to reach more people.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And I'm sure with your history, with your working professional history as well, obviously, how you develop over the years on an individual level, a lot of things around the leadership got crystallized, because not only you got a chance to practice, but also to live through that. So, and how did you decide even to start and get into military? Because that is also something that I'm sure many listeners and viewers will be interested in, specifically as we're seeing how much that shapes the character, and specifically on such a high ranking that you were able to accomplish yourself.
Yeah, so I was always the leader of something, my sports teams, Boy Scouts, I was the president of student government, I was different things. So I was a leader a lot when I was a younger man, and I really enjoyed being the leader. And then I also played sports, played baseball, basketball, football in high school, and I got some offers to play baseball at college. So I knew I wanted to go to college. And then I started looking at Army ROTC. I knew I had an idea that I wanted to be an Army officer. Now, I didn't know I was going to make a career out of it. I didn't know I was going to do 23 years, but I knew I wanted to at least try it. And so I pursued the ROTC scholarship and won one, and did Army ROTC in college. And got my commission as an infantry officer in the United States Army, did my first 5 years in the infantry. And then I switched over to armored cavalry, and I rode around on M1 tanks for the last 18 years in the Army. Inside of that as well, I did a lot of teaching and positions like that as well inside the Army. But I always, once I got in the Army and I was an Army officer, I knew that's what I was going to do. I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Wow, that is amazing, because so many of us, even as a younger version of ourselves, we're not really clear who we want to be and what we wanted to do, right? And a lot of times we get influenced by society or by the trends. And as a result, we see so many people that pursue not only different careers, but also lifestyle and paths, and they realize, it's like, these things are not for me, and what do I do now, when it's really maybe sometimes, I would say late, but it's just when so many decisions are being already made, and it's very difficult to follow through with all of them. Some Army and everything you experience to really hone your leadership skill set. And what would you recommend for our listeners and viewers, not necessarily just considering Army or joining military in the United States or any type of form where programs can work on personal development as well as professional development?
Right. So one of the things I always tell people is, if you want to get involved if you want to be an officer in the Army, but certainly we have leaders in the Army that are not officers, NCOs, senior NCOs. I always tell people that some of the best leaders I've ever worked with were some of the people who worked for me as an NCO. And in my book, I mentioned retired Master Sergeant David Powell, who is probably one of the best leaders I think I've ever met in my life. So there are plenty of paths to get into a leadership position if you want to do it in the military. But one of the things I try to emphasize to people is, if you really want to be a leader, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to be the leader. I always tell great leaders want to lead all the time. I want to lead all the time. I want to be the leader all the time. Now, I know when I go home tonight and I walk in my door, I know I'm not the leader anymore. I've been married for 34 years for a reason. I know where I stand in my household. My wife is the leader. I got that. But when I walk out the next morning, I want to be the leader again. Because the only way you are going to get better at leading is to practice leading. We can talk about leadership all we want, you and I, and talk about it in a classroom. And that's all great stuff, and it needs to be talked about. But the only way you're going to get better at being a leader is to actually get out there and lead, where you make mistakes, you do things that you figure out work for you that may not work for somebody else, but they work for you. So the only way to do that is to go out there and lead. The other piece of it that I always tell people is leadership is leadership. I don't care where you learned it. I don't care where you practiced it. If you are a leader, you can lead anything. And I'm a perfect example of that. Most of my leadership experience was in the Army, but when I retired from the Army, I was the associate director of a food bank for almost 2 years, where I ran the day-to-day operation of a food bank. I knew nothing about a food bank when I started that job, absolutely nothing. I was a combat arms officer. So, but in that 18 months, I knew how to lead, so I could direct people that did know how to run the day-to-day operation, the things I needed done. And we increased the amount of food that we handed out from 1.8 million to 3.2 million pounds of food per year in the 18 months that I was there. So if you can lead, you can lead anything. I don't care what it is.
That is amazing. And I love that you reflect on that. In Oakland, I don't know if you've seen this as well, but we're seeing often issue where people are mistaking by leaders, considering leaders just because somebody has the power and has a title and opportunity to make a big, important choices, decisions. And I feel like a lot of times people see that as a leadership, and they want it to follow and based on their demonstrated behavior. But a lot of times people, not necessarily, as you mentioned, that are having a title are the ones that we follow or exude that leadership skill set. As you mentioned, you have someone who worked for you that was exceptional leader because not because of title, obviously, but because of skill and desire to demonstrate that consistently. So do you mind sharing a little bit for everybody that is listening, your take on that? Because I feel like that creates a barrier, but also creates a misunderstanding what the leadership it's all about. And specifically the current times where we're seeing so much polarization and division and so many conflicts that comes in because how we use these terminologies and how do we really actually use the power?
Right. So one of the things, as we commission young men and women into the Army as a lieutenant, so they're an officer, they actually have the title and they're a leader, or they should be. And one of the things I always tell them is the day they get commissioned, I say, look, enjoy today, because the day is all about you. It's about you getting your commission. It's a great thing. But after today, when we pin those bars on your shoulder and you become an officer and you're now a leader in the United States Army, it will never be about you ever again. It's about your soldiers. It's about your mission. It's about the company. It's about the Army. It's about the nation. And then if we got time, we might talk about you. We might. But you got to understand that leadership is about selfless service. It is not about you. It is not about you getting more privileges and living in a nicer house and making more money and driving a nicer car. That's not why we made you the leader. We made you a leader so that you could better serve those who work for you and those people that you work for. And I think a lot of people don't understand that that's really what leadership is about. And we got to get to the point where people understand that. And I think the people that we're talking about that don't understand that, who just want the title, they never become really good leaders. And there's that phenomena out there that even if you have the title, that doesn't mean people are actually following you. They may be following somebody else who is actually the leader without the title. And that happens quite a bit, as it should, because if somebody's not doing the job, then somebody's going to step up. That's human nature. Somebody is going to step up and take charge if nobody else is.
And that is an excellent distinction and point, and you're spot on. And as a result, we have a chance to raise the bar, but we also have a chance to raise our own performance. Obviously, because you have over 40 years of the experience, not only just in U.S. Army, but also in civilian positions, and you continue to impact, influence future generation of leaders, right? Through your recruitment efforts and through grooming and coaching and training people in that environment. What's really interesting is the shift that we're seeing on global scale, and what type of leadership do we need, what types of traits people should be exuding, and how do we can really fill the gap? Because right now it's been proven over and over through analysis, statistics, and different publications from reputable organizations, from Gallup to Harvard Business Review, you name it, around the deficit in leadership skill sets. So since leadership is such a big passion for both of us, and I will share a little bit about the reason why for me, I really feel like it's also a great opportunity to truly pick and figure it out where we're headed, what we're doing, and what the future is holding, right? Because we also need to project in the future. What did we learn from the past, where we're right now, and where we're headed? And I think that is also one huge opportunity, because share that vision and be able to be laser focused to really obtain that. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that experience and how you are navigating all these changes and advising others to do the same?
Yeah, so one of the things that the Master Sergeant, I talked about Master Sergeant David Powell, he told me one time, we were just talking. He worked for me when I was the professor of military science, and we were talking about the importance of what we were doing, creating the future generation of leaders for the United States Army, impacting the Army for the next 20, 25 years. And he said to me, just kind of off the cuff, he didn't even I don't think either one of us kind of at that point figured out that I would use it in a book. But he said, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And I thought, later on, I thought, wow, what a statement, and how true. And you can take that nations and change that out into companies or businesses or hospitals or universities or whatever it is that you do. But great leadership is kind of the key. And one of the things that is so important as a leader is to have that vision of where you want to take that organization that you are now in charge of. And I always tell people, when you take over an organization, you ought to be able to, after being there for a little while, figure out where you are as an organization. And then one of the whole reasons we made you the leader was to figure out where you want to take that organization a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, however far out you want to go. So where you want to take it, and then to be able to communicate to the people who work for you in that organization, this is where we are, this is where we want to be, and here is the path we're going to use to get there. And it's so important to communicate that to the people who work for you, because they're the ones who are going to get you there. If you think that as the leader, you're the one that's going to take you from where you are now to where you're going to want to go by yourself, you are sadly mistaken. The people who are going to do that for you are the people who work for you. So you got to be able to take that vision and communicate it to people. And if you can do that, then you got a shot as a leader. And that communication piece is just so important.
I love it. And one thing, what I'm also learning and what I'm seeing from my driver's seat here, how it's important also to let those individuals to shine and express themselves and lead, because everybody has a specific niche or specific expertise, right? And when we are surrounded by such a powerful force and letting everybody to do their part, everybody wins. And it's just a beauty, because complementary skill sets, complementary focus, complementary desire, not only to show up in the best version as an individual contributor, but also as a team. And then unity of that team is the one that wins championships, that wins those amazing long-term goals, because we're talking about sometimes, in many cases, eternity, meaning, life career, life path that is never ending, and that carries through. So do you mind just sharing, what is your take, what the legacy leadership is to you, and why it's so important from your perspective? Because a lot of times I get asked that question, and I would love to hear your perspective and how all this ties together.
Yeah, so one of the things that I always say is that, leaders produce leaders. Leaders don't produce followers. There's plenty of followers, and they're always going to be there. But your job, one of your jobs as the leader, is to create that next generation of leaders. That's our responsibility as today's leaders, to create the young men and women, the leaders of the next generation, who are going to take our jobs, take our position. Someday old men like me are going to have to turn around and say, okay, young man, young lady, now it's your job. And hopefully I trained you well enough to be the next generation of leaders that you're going to do a better job than we did. Because that's the other piece of the leadership thing, is that you always want to lead that organization better than what you got it. And I think that if you train the people, the next generation, if you make that your job as part of your legacy, is to train the next generation of leaders better than you were trained, then we're going to be okay in this country. If we don't do that, then we're going down a road that I don't think any of us really want to go. So part of that is, like you said, use everybody's expertise. If you think that for 1 minute that you've got all the knowledge, and that you got to make every decision based just on your knowledge and your ability, then you're not doing that organization any good service. You need to use the expertise of all the people there. And I always say, when I had a job to do or a task, I would pull in all of my junior leaders, and I'd say, okay, guys and gals, here's what we got to do. Give me some ideas of how you would do that. What's some ways that we can do? And, I've listened to everybody. It doesn't mean you have to use everybody's opinion or any of their ideas, but at least you listen to it. And generally what I figured out was that I take a little bit of this person's and a little bit of that person's, and then take some of mine, and I'd kind of put it all together. And then we'd use a little bit of expertise from everybody to make a good decision. And most of the time you have the time to be able to do that. There are times when you can't, obviously, and you got to make a decision right away. But for the most part, you can do that. And if you do that, then that does two things. Number one, it builds the trust. People believe that you want to hear their opinion. And number two, when you do that, now it isn't your decision, it's our decision. And now people buy into that, and they're willing to work a little bit harder, because It's
Yeah.
they've bought into the solution. It isn't just you telling people what to do. Because the other piece of that communication piece is, if you think that communication is just a one-way communication where you're telling people all the time what to do and how to do it, and you're not listening to them, then you're not a leader, you're a dictator.
That is such an important distinction, but is also a great way to leveraging others people's skills, but also, as you said, to have that shared vision and not dealing with the resistance and convincing and being strict and rigid, which we know that people may initially listen, but deep down they dread it or just cannot wait to leave. And as a result, we're seeing more conflict and lack of cooperation versus contrary, more opportunities and great collaboration. So to me, I see it as a legacy as the top tier of all leadership, right? And I love that you also emphasizing on the value, because that is something that I feel like we all should have a sense of urgency to know, individually, how we contribute, how we're showing up, and are we creating something impactful and valuable, not only just for ourselves and immediate family members, but also for the humanity and larger picture in that. And then also, how is it possible to lead effectively without being that rigid, controlling, demanding, totalitarian types of leaders? That it's fear-based, and because we're seeing, and it's a lot of perception, it's like military, it's very challenging, difficult, but in reality, it's not all about that fear-based or about that rigid types of leadership. And I feel like we see this is the same thing in corporate. We see that in nonprofits in different sectors where we have certain commonalities, yet on contrary, we're also seeing amazing similarities where things can shine and really show what's possible, and then how we intersect so beautifully into that. So with that in mind, I'm curious, with everything you've been doing and you've accomplished so much, what do you feel like right now it's in the bucket list for you to do and bring to the light with all this wisdom and such amazing knowledge?
So really, for me, again, I wrote the book, and I think that I've had people tell me, and two things that they asked me. So who did you really write the book for? And I said, I really wrote it for two groups of people. I said, for the young men and women, either in high school or college, who are aspiring to be leaders, or the junior leaders, like my son, who's a junior leader in the company that he's in. Those people, because a lot of them don't understand what is required to be a leader. So I'm trying to tell them that not only is this what's required, but this is how you get there. But I also wrote it for old people like me, who, somebody like me who's been a leader for 20, 30, 40 years is probably not going to learn anything new from reading my book. But what it will do is it'll say, as you're reading it, you might say, yeah, I used to do that really well, but I don't do that so well anymore. And maybe I need to put some more emphasis on that. So it's just kind of a refresher of what it is that we need to do to be a leader. And I think, for me, what I really want to do, my passion is trying to get me out there so that I can go talk to young men and women. I'd love to do that. I tell people I never turn down a chance to talk to young men and women. I mean, to me, that's the goal. If you can if I go and I talk to a group of 20 or 30 people and I impact one person, that was worth my time.
That is so beautiful, and you're spot on. Sometimes we don't know how far we reach and how far it's our impact, right? And emphasizing on that. But even if it is just one person that gets chance to understand that, and as a result makes better decision or feels supported, even though it's virtually or however, right? It is the success. And a lot of times those little leaps and bounds can truly accumulate to amazing rippling effect. And I love that you are focusing on future generations as well, reminder, because as adults, we are less daring to fail, right? Or try something new, or to try to practice something we already know in the different ways, because technology is changing everything, right? Our virtual conversation that we're having right now, it's allowing us to really have a conversation around topics, but also to really bring the information to the light in a different way, and how we consume, how we connect, but also how we continuously continue to make a difference and improve. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about how you're seeing where the future is headed in terms of leadership? What do you see that will be such a huge, tremendous opportunity and in growth that you feel like it's absolutely necessary to address?
Yeah, I think, again, leadership is leadership. And that doesn't mean that some parts of it don't change how we do things over time as like you said, we get new technology. Like when I was a brand new lieutenant, I would never have imagined that we would be sitting here talking and I could see on the screen, we'd be talking and having an interview on screen. I mean, that technology wasn't even there. I always say, when I was a lieutenant, when I went to the first Gulf War, my wife was 7 months pregnant. I didn't see my daughter until she was 5 months old because we didn't have cell phones where I could see and talk and all those kinds of things. So technology certainly does impact our ability to lead, how we lead. I don't think it impacts much our leadership principles, the things that make us a good leader. Being able to communicate changes how we communicate maybe, but we still got to be able to communicate well. How all those kinds of things that are important as a leader, selfless service, being decisive, all those things. Technology certainly allows us to do it in a different way and sometimes in a better way, but those principles of leadership shouldn't change that much. But I think that the future of leadership, I think we have to keep in mind that leadership is a personal thing where we have to have a connection with people. To me, the whole idea of leadership is personal experience with other people. If you can't develop those relationships, you can't develop those trusts, those kinds of things, then I don't care what technology you have, you're not going to be a good leader. And it kind of goes back to, Vince Lombardi once said, a team is not a group of people who play together. A team is a group of people who trust each other. And that really goes back to developing those relationships with people. And if you can't develop relationships with people, then you're going to have a hard time being a good leader.
That is so beautiful. And I'm glad you just depicted a little bit because it's a choice, right? It's leadership. It's not for everyone. And then, as you said, plenty of people that's going to follow and then just follow the orders and do that way. But also it is a tremendous opportunity more than ever for people that want to step up and actually take a lead and take initiative. Technology is helping us to disseminate amazing information and quality and have a further reach than ever before, right? Because of digitalization and ebooks and videos and all this great content. So the reach is now beyond the classroom, beyond the military, like, for example, the division of the military, like US Army or whatnot. Right. But it's really something that, again, is applicable. So that allows everybody who does choose to become the leader they're meant to be. And I'm curious, what is the path forward for becoming that leader that you're meant to be for audience that is watching and listening, that's eager to depict on your book, but also of your work? Because ultimately, we don't see necessarily our strengths. We don't see how maybe amazing, brilliant, capable we are unless somebody truly genuinely take interest in us and is able to look at and see, first of all, where we're at to meet us where we're at, right? But also to really help us out to navigate, because a lot of times, as you know, we hear more often criticism and things that are not right or not going well versus things that we are doing great and actually that are our strong suit. So I feel like it's also a tremendous opportunity to change that. So I'm curious, how do you navigate to help someone to be the leader they're meant to be, or how did you do and apply that for yourself?
Yeah, so I think that one of the most important things as a leader, if you want to help develop the next generation of leaders, is mentorship. And I've been lucky throughout my career. I've had some very very great leaders that took an interest in me. People who retired a 3- and 4-star general in the Army that for whatever reason took an interest in me, and I could always call up and say, "Hey, boss, what do you think of this?" And one of my things, I had a a mentor who retired, a 4-star general, and I could always call him. And every 2 years you move in the Army, they give you a new job and you move. And my branch assignments officer would call up and say, "Hey, Oak, this is what I got for you next." And I'd say, "Just hold on." And I'd pick up the phone and I'd call my mentor and I'd say, "Hey, boss, this is what they're talking about me doing next." And he'd always tell me one of two things. He'd either say, "Great job, Oak, take it." Or he'd say, "Run, Oak, run very fast. You don't want that job." and so it was always nice to be able to do that, to talk to this mentor who knew much more than I did. And it was always nice to get his advice. I didn't always take his advice, but it was always nice to get his advice. So I tell people, you must be a mentor. You can't mentor everybody. You don't have time. But as a leader, you must pick those diamonds in the rough out there that you think are going to be the jewels of your organization 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, and start developing them so that they're ready to take that leadership position. Small steps to begin with, maybe, but eventually those are the people who you're thinking are going to grow up to be the next generation of senior leaders like you are. And it really is your responsibility to do that. And like I said, I've been pretty lucky throughout my life that I've had some pretty amazing leaders who have taken interest in me and helped me out throughout my time.
That is brilliant. And I wish for everybody that's watching and listening to this to really start thinking through who are those people in their lives, or if they don't have many or any, to really look at who could play, who they're looking up to, who is a great role model, and who should be worthwhile following and connecting with, and as a result engaging. And do you mind sharing a little bit of that mentorship criteria? Because with the hunger, with the desire, with the passion, obviously, to be the best you can be, it's easy because you're already there, you're already ready, and you continue to hone your skill sets even 40 some years later, right? You don't stop, you just keep going. I'm curious, how do you see great candidate in front of you? Because mentorship takes a lot of effort, not just from mentor, but obviously a lot of work the mentee needs to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and what you hit it right on the head, even after 40 years, I'm still learning stuff and I'm still improving. And leadership is not a destination, it's a journey, and you're not going to ever wake up one day and say, "Okay, I'm the best leader I'm ever going to be and I'm done." Well, if you think that, then you are done. You're not the best leader you can be, and you're not going to get any better at it. It is a journey, and every day, hopefully you're learning something else, or every so often you'll learn something that's going to help you be even better. But I think that that part of that leadership, being a mentor to somebody, is giving them feedback, good and bad. I mean, you have to be brutally honest with people, and you got to say, "Okay, you aren't doing this well enough," but not just being honest in that you're not doing it well enough, but then you got to say, "Okay, here are the steps that you must take. These are the things you got to do to get better at that." And I think if you do that, if you're really honest with people and you're giving honest feedback, good and bad, both verbally and written, one of the things that I think the Army has done very well throughout the years, and at least the Army I grew up in, and how we did it, was every quarter your boss had to in writing tell you how you're doing. And so I always, even when I took over at the food bank, I implemented that. And my son, who was in the Army for a little while, but now is he's in a civilian job, he's implemented that in his company to do the in writing every quarter, so that nobody is going to go the entire year and not know that they're not doing what you're being asked. And I always tell people that if you're the leader and somebody that's working for you is not giving you what you asked for or what you need, and you haven't told them that, that's your fault. That's not their fault. They may think they're giving you exactly what you're asking for. They don't know. So you got to be able to communicate both verbally and, in my opinion, it's great to do it in writing. What is expected of them, how they're doing, and if they're not doing what's expected, how to get better at what they're doing.
That is such a brilliant point, because you spot on frequent conversations and giving concrete examples and concrete expectations. Clarity is so huge, right? Communications is essential, but also understanding where that person is coming from and where they want to go. Sometimes we would get surprised that people maybe not necessarily even motivated, but they're maybe content and happy in an area. Do they have a potential? Absolutely. But do they want to tap into that potential? They truly need to want it and desire it. That we can't convince and chase someone.
That's right.
And it took me a while. I remember my rookie mistakes, because meeting people where they are, right? And then knowing what it's important to them, it's also essential too. But also having these hard conversations. That is, to me, utmost leadership command and understanding of honing those skill sets, because it's easy when it's easy. But when it's hard and challenging, and yet you still have to show up. So do you mind sharing a little bit about navigation and addressing some of those challenges during those times? What would you recommend? Because we're seeing plethora of these issues right now, don't we?
Yeah, so I think, you hit it right on the head again. It's easy to talk to people when things are all rosy and everybody's getting what they want. But when things get tough, then sometimes it's hard to be that honest person and tell them that, things aren't going the way that we want it to go, either because of something you're doing or just because of the environment, COVID. I mean, how many people had to have that hard conversation because of businesses and everything shutting down because of COVID and all that. So, I mean, you really have to have that ability to still care for that person, but tell them the truth and kind of guide them where we're going to go from here. If you need to give them that advice. But I think that one of the things that we have to remember is that communication is so important. And, you said somebody may not want to move forward. It doesn't mean they can't, and maybe at some point they will, but at some point, we get fixated on this up or out mentality. And certainly in the military, we're fixated on that. Either you're going to move up or we're going to get rid of you. But that's not necessarily the right answer for every organization. It might be great to leave somebody in the position they're in. If they love what they're doing a great job, and that's what they want to do, why do we have to force them to move up? If they want to move up, then it's our job and our responsibility as the leader to help them do that however they want. But we should not force people to move up if that's not what they want to do.
Yes, and then also seen as a punishment, because also see people that are being in certain areas and expertise. So let's just use an example, technology, for example, and they're phenomenal in that space. Now they're adding more to their portfolio in terms of additional artificial intelligence and everything else, or different divisions of technology. But yet they're such a subject matter expert, and they are so knowledgeable, and they know things inside out. And they're just so completely content in that space. That doesn't mean they're not learning in that niche that they're experts at more. But on the other hand, we're feeling so much spread out and too many generalists. And then where's there are those subject matter experts, right? And to me, leadership is such a requirement of subject matter expertise, because it's so complex and means in different stages, not only who we are, but also where the business is at, where the rest of the world is at, who is ready for what type of leadership, right? And what type of demonstrated type of behavior, as well as specific skill sets. And we need to be able to depict that very well. So
one of the things about that is, and it goes back to my point about some of the best leaders I've ever had were actually people who worked for me, in that we, I'll give you an example. When I was a brand new second lieutenant, I took over a platoon of infantry guys. There were 32 guys, and I had a sergeant first class who was my platoon sergeant, so my second in command for the platoon. And when I took over, the day I took over, they were already out at a range, and my company commander, my boss, took me out there and introduced me to my platoon sergeant. And he said, I'll never forget him, Sergeant First Class Penson. He was 6'6", big giant man from Mississippi. and he said, "Come on over here, Lieutenant, and let's go have lunch underneath this tree." And we sat down and we had an MRE. We're eating our MRE there. And he said, "Sir, you're the boss. This platoon will do whatever it is you want to do, however you want to do it." He said, "But I've been in the Army for 23 years. I was only 24 years old. He had been in the Army for almost as long as I'd been alive. He said, "I've been in the Army for 23 years. And if you're messing up, I'm going to tell you." He said, "If you still want to do it that way, we'll do it that way. You're the boss. But it's my responsibility to tell you when you're not doing something right, in my opinion. And then you make the decision. You're the guy in charge. You're the guy that has your name on the blame line. You decide what you want to do." And, I give Sergeant Pinson a lot of credit for helping to develop my leadership skills, because I thought I was a pretty good leader and I had some good skills, but that doesn't mean you can't improve them. And he certainly did help me improve my skills and help make me the person I am and the leader I am. And he had no problems. I mean, there were times when I made a decision, he and I were talking. I said, "I think this is what we're going to do, Sergeant Pinson." And he'd say, "I don't think you want to do it that way." So, and every time he said that, I stopped and listened to him because he had a lot of experience. There were a couple of times when I said, "Okay, Sergeant Pinson, I see what you're saying, but we're going to do it and we're going to do it this way." But for the most part, I always, if he questioned it, I always stopped and rethought what we were doing. And I think that's important, that you learn those skill sets. You come with a certain skill set, but that doesn't mean you can't continue to build on them. And lots of times it's that expert who works below you who is going to help you develop those skill sets. And I always use this example. My father's best friend when I was growing up, he worked at Chrysler, the Chrysler plant that was near where we grew up. And for 39 years, this man was in charge of putting fenders on whatever vehicle was being made at that Chrysler plant. So if you were running that plant and you were having problems with fenders, who would you go talk to? I hope you would go talk to that man who's been doing it for 39 years, because I'm sure he knew that there were problems. He probably told somebody that there were problems, and that person said, "I don't care, go do your job." So we got to use everybody in the organization to improve our skill sets and use their expertise, because we don't have all the expertise. I don't care how long you've been a leader. I don't care how long you've been in that organization. There's always somebody who knows something more about something else.
That is so powerful and beautiful. Thank you for sharing those great stories, but also drawing from that obviously helps you to be better decision makers. So really look at things in position from multiple different ways and really hone that, right? And look at things from perspective that sometimes just the lack of experience, or just simply because we were doing this way, we're not possibly considering looking things in a different way. That doesn't mean that is one right and the other is wrong, but it's just, as they say, so many different ways that we can make something happen. Question it is inclusive, is it collaborative, is this holding everybody accountable, is on holding high standards, is it something that is going to have a positive impact versus, or just get done but then have a very negative implications, right? And I love one thing you brought up among many others of trust. I feel like a trust factor right now more than ever is fundamental. And sometimes we speed up to slow down, because we cannot just march because we are ready if rest of the team is not ready, or people that we need to collaborate with or arrive to same decision, and to bring that gap for us to march forward. So right now, with everything that we shared in this episode, and with your brilliant, again, a background and being retired lieutenant from U.S. Army with over 40 years, not only leading teams and being in different factions, but also in civilian world and educational space, and now obviously as a speaker and author, I'm curious, what would you like your legacy to be? What would you like to be remembered for? You already carved such amazing paths and you accomplished so much, but I'm sure there is a lot more that you wanted to make it happen.
So, I mean, to me, at this point in my life, it really is my passion to help develop future generations of leaders. I would love to have my legacy be that I helped develop people who are going to be the future leaders of not only the Army, and I'm doing that with helping to commission people, but even beyond the Army, that the company, the people's companies, the country, because I always tell when I bring in a whole bunch of new freshmen, and I'm the first time I talk to them and they're all in the room together, I said, look, you have no idea what kind of talent is in this room right now. We could have somebody in here who's going to be the future chief of staff of the Army, the general of the Army. We could have some people in here who are going to be senators or the president of the United States or CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. So that's the quality of people that we need to work, that we're working with, and we got to help develop the people so that they are developing into the best leaders that they can be, because that really is that going back to that quote, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. I honestly believe that. And I think that as leaders, that is our job, our responsibility. And I hope it's my legacy that I did help develop the future generation that's going to eventually take over and do a better job of running this country than even we did.
That is such a beautiful and such an amazing legacy to have. Obviously, you already shaped so much in that direction and accomplished so much. And I just want to go and kudo you and thank you for your service and everything you do. But now with everything that is coming together, I'm super excited to see where things will take you and opportunities to further explore, collaborate, and make a not only impact in our nation here in the United States, but as a result also lead with example to really show how much smart, intelligent, capable people we have, not only on collective level, but also in right positions so that we can really show what's possible and continue to lead and be great example across the world and impact the rest of the world, right?
Absolutely. And I still, I've been in 44 countries on 5 continents. I never would have been able to do that had I hadn't been in the Army, but I've seen a lot of the world. And, the old thing, America really is that shining city on the hill, and we got to make sure that it stays that way. Do we make mistakes? Absolutely we do. But I think that we need to be that example for the rest of the world, and we can be if we want to be.
I love it because people is watching and it's interesting as being a European and growing up in Europe, how much is being replicated or duplicated of certain things in Europe and different parts of the world as well. I actually travel very close to about the same amount of countries and obviously 47 states, which I'm really proud of it too, because it's not that I just explored the world, but I also explored this amazing nation and being here, coming as a refugee and starting my life after horrible events and seeing and working in refugee camps with people that are being affected by the worst possible atrocities of humankind. That is the lens that I contrast, and I'm sure for some of the bases you've been and parts of the world you've been not only for pleasure for it, but also through the Army involved in seeing magnitude of immigrants and refugees and genocide, torture, war trauma, human traffic survivors. I just wanted to say it's interesting when you see the other side of the coin, when people will say peacekeepers came and they were really supportive, or peacekeepers came and they're actually added more to the problem instead of solution, or they were corrupted and they created all these other issues. And it's so interesting to hear from over 120 actually countries directly, intimately, their stories, which is more than half of the world in modern time that is being tremendously affected. And now I feel like with this beautiful closing of this conversation, Auckland, I'm just so honored and to have the opportunity and privilege, not only to have this conversation, but really to create something magical that's going to cover both sides of the same coin and create something that's going to transform humanity that is desperately needing right now, which is demonstrated and support through the lens of legacy and legacy leadership. Yeah,
well, thank you very much for having me on the show, Izabela. It was great, and I'm looking forward to working with you later on, follow on, and continue to work with you, because I think you're right. I mean, what we were talking about is so important, and we both have that passion. So I think there are things that we can do. And I appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Oakland, for taking your time, for stepping up and not only writing the book, sharing your passion, your legacy, your leadership legacy, becoming the leader you want to be. Please, everyone that is watching and listening, I will have that as an comment opportunity, not only to connect with the retired lieutenant, but also to have a chance to pick his book, as well as opportunities and things that he's doing at current time. And I look forward to sharing more and some amazing things that are going to come as a result of it. So again, thank you, listeners, and everybody, please make sure you share the podcast and the show, you comment, engage, and ask questions. And this is to be continued. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Legacy Leader Show. If you enjoyed the content and had a positive experience, then please leave us a positive rating. In addition, leave us a positive review whenever you are listening on whatever platform there might be. Make sure your friends and family also know about the benefit and value that we provide and what we have to offer. Cheers.